I've worked as a park ranger for most of my adult life. I've seen a lot of things people wouldn't believe. Accidents, animal attacks, and people getting turned around in their own campsite and walking straight into the woods like something was calling to them. But this one still keeps me up. It happened 2 years ago out at Briar Ridge National Forest in Montana. It's a big place, over 200,000 acres of wilderness. I'd been stationed there for about 8 years. It's the kind of job where you can go weeks without seeing another person once the season ends. Around late September, we started getting reports of missing hikers. Nothing too unusual at first. Solo campers, hunters who didn't sign the trail log, that sort of thing. It happens every year, but by mid-month, there were 5 open cases, and that's when we knew something wasn't right. The last one was a girl named Carly Jensen, 22, college kid. She drove up here to photograph the early fall colors. She never came back. Her car was still at the trailhead, but her campsite was a mile off trail. Her tent was smashed, her personal stuff was scattered, and there was no sign of animals and no footprints except her own. We ran search teams for 3 days. On the 3rd night, I decided to stay out after dark and check the North Ridge myself. I told the others I'd be fine. I've hiked that area 100 times. I had my flashlight, my radio, and my sidearm. What I didn't have was common sense, apparently. The woods felt strange that night. I've done a lot of solo patrols, and usually the forest settles into a kind of rhythm once the sun goes down. Crickets, wind through the trees, just that low hum of life after dark. But that night, there was nothing. No sound at all, just my boots and the occasional pop of a branch somewhere far off trail. About an hour in, I found a set of boot prints. Small ones, probably hers. They led up the ridge towards a clearing I didn't recognize. Then they just stopped. She vanished mid-step. The ground was soft too. If she turned back, I'd have seen it. I was crouched down looking at the dirt when my radio crackled. "Cole, are you still out there?" It was Marla, our night dispatcher. "Yeah," I said. "North Ridge. I found something." She told me the sheriff's office wanted everyone in before full dark. I told her 10 more minutes and I head back. When I stood up, I saw something on a nearby tree. A glint, metal reflecting my light. It was a trail camera, zip-tied to the trunk. But it wasn't one of ours. Ours are tagged and logged. This one was older, camouflaged, and filthy. I took it down to check it out. The casing had smears of something dark on it that looked like dried blood. I pocketed the SD card, made a note of the coordinates, and turned around to leave. That's when I saw a person standing about 30 yards away. At first, I thought it was a hiker. Tall, wearing dark clothes, but they weren't holding a light, and they weren't moving. Just standing between the trees, watching me. I called out, "Park ranger, you need help?" But they didn't answer. They didn't even flinch. I took 1 step towards them, and they just turned around and left into the dark. Silent. No flashlight, no noise. I chased after them for maybe 50 yards before realizing I couldn't see anything beyond my own beam. Every direction looked the same. I knew if I kept going, I'd lose my bearings, so I turned back. By the time I reached my truck, it was pitch black. I drove straight to the station. Marla was inside, drinking coffee like always. I told her what happened and showed her the camera. We loaded the SD card into the office computer. There were about 10 clips on it, so we opened the most recent one. The footage was night vision, grainy and green. It showed a clearing, probably the same spot where Carly's tent was found. After about 30 seconds, a girl walked into frame with a lantern. Same hair, same jacket. It was definitely Carly. She was kneeling near her tent when another figure stepped into frame. Hooded, no light, no sound. Carly turned toward them, startled. You could see her mouth moving, maybe asking who it was. The person stepped closer, and the video cut out. The next clip started maybe an hour later. It was the same clearing, but the tent was flattened. The camera had been moved, pointed a little higher this time. You could see rope hanging from a branch. That was enough for both of us. Marla went to call the sheriff, and that's when the radio came to life again. "Dispatch, this is Deputy Heller. We're getting reports of a ranger truck seen moving near the North Ridge again. Are you guys still out there?" Marla looked at me. "You took the truck, right?" I said, "Yeah, it's right outside." We stepped out to check. Sure enough, the truck was parked exactly where I'd left it. Only now the driver's door was cracked open. I walked over, flashlight up, hand on my holster. The cab was empty, but sitting on the dash was a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it, and in jagged handwriting it said, 'You shouldn't have taken my camera.' I swear my stomach dropped into my boots. I yelled for Marla, but when I turned back towards the station, the lights were flickering. I ran inside. The main room was empty. Her mug was on the floor, shattered. The chair she'd been sitting in was tipped over, and there was no sign of her. That's when I heard something. A soft dragging noise coming from the back hallway. I followed it with my gun down. The hall was dark except for the flashlight beam shaking in my hand. I reached the last door, the maintenance closet, and pushed it open. Nothing, just the hum of the water heater. When I turned back, someone was standing on the other end of the hallway. Same hood, same height, just standing there. I yelled at them to stop, that the law enforcement were on their way. They didn't move. Then the lights went out completely. I heard footsteps, fast, coming right for me. I fired twice. I couldn't see a damn thing. When the lights flickered back, the hallway was empty again, but there was blood. Not much, just drops leading toward the back door. I followed the trail outside, but it vanished after a few feet. I called for backup, but the radio was pure static. Then, faintly, through the noise, a voice whispered my name. Not Marla's voice, a man's. You shouldn't have taken it. I shut the radio off and got back in the truck, or what I thought was my truck. The keys worked, but when I looked in the mirror, there was a handprint on the back window, fresh, smudged across the glass. I drove up to the fire tower and stayed there till morning. I couldn't sleep. I just watched the woods. Sometimes I swore I could see movement between the trees. People exactly, but shapes, like shadows walking against the moonlight. When the sheriff's department arrived at sunrise, the ranger station was trashed. There was blood on the floor, but no sign of Marla. My real truck was found abandoned a few miles north with the engine still running. They questioned me for hours, asked if I'd been drinking, if I imagined it. They took the SD card too, but when they tried to play it, they said it was corrupted. A few days later, I went back to that clearing with a few deputies. The rope was gone, so was the camera I'd left behind. Here's the part that still messes with me. About a week after the incident, a new trail camera showed up at the station. No note, no address, just sitting on the drop box outside. When we checked it, there was only one clip. It was me, walking up the ridge that night, flashlight in hand, but the footage was taken from behind me. No one ever found out who filmed it. Marla's body was never recovered, and neither were the missing hikers. I quit a few months later. I thought about moving states, but couldn't bring myself to go near the woods anymore. Sometimes, though, when I drive past a tree line at night, I swear I can see a faint green light blinking between the trees, like a camera watching. I worked as a fire lookout ranger in the Bitterroot Range of Montana in the summer of 2019. It was my third season up there. I'd done the isolation thing before. 2-week shifts alone in a tower, reporting smoke columns, keeping track of campers, and monitoring storms. Some people can't handle the quiet. Me, I liked it. Until that year. The park had 6 towers. Mine was Tower 6, the farthest one out, about 14 miles from the nearest road, surrounded by dense forest. The access trail was steep and narrow, so most supplies got dropped off by chopper. It was peaceful usually. The only real excitement was radio chatter with the other rangers. But one morning, something odd came through. Tower 6, this is 4. You got anyone hiking near you? I said no, I hadn't seen a soul in 2 days. Then Tower 4's operator Mike said, "Copy that, just keep an eye out. I picked up movement on a thermal near your ridge last night. Looked like a person." I asked if it could have been an animal. He hesitated. Maybe, but it was walking upright. That wasn't the first time we'd had weird reports. Hunters going off trail, campers ignoring warnings. But something in Mike's voice felt different. That night, I stayed up later than usual, scanning the tree line with my binoculars. I didn't see anything, but I definitely heard something. Not the usual forest noise either. It was faint, like someone was whistling. A short, low tune repeated every few seconds, coming from the tree line right below my tower. It went on for maybe a minute, then stopped. I called it in, half embarrassed. Tower 6 to base. I've got possible trespassers near my perimeter. Hearing some kind of signal or whistle. Base told me to stay put and log it. They'd send a patrol up in the morning. I didn't sleep much after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I thought I heard footsteps on the gravel path below. When daylight came, I climbed down to check the ground. Sure enough, there were boot prints. Fresh ones. But they weren't heading toward the tower. They were circling it. Like someone had walked around me in the dark, over and over, and then left. I radioed it in again. Mike joked that maybe I had a fan club, but he didn't sound convinced. The patrol didn't find anything. They told me it was probably just a lost hiker. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that somebody had been watching me. That evening, around sunset, I caught movement near the tree line again. This time, it was definitely a person. Tall, slim, and wearing a light-colored shirt. They were standing maybe 100 yards out, facing the tower, just standing there. I grabbed the binoculars, but by the time I focused, they were gone. At this point, I started locking the hatch and sleeping with the radio beside my cot. The silence felt heavier now, like the forest was holding its breath waiting for something. Then came the second night of whistling. It was the same tune, only this time it started closer. And then the sound of footsteps on the ladder. You've never known real fear until you've heard metal creaking under your feet and realized someone's climbing up towards you in total darkness. I killed my lantern, grabbed the rifle from its rack, and aimed it at the hatch. The footsteps got slower the higher they went. Then they stopped. For about 30 seconds, I didn't move. I couldn't even breathe. Then something scraped along the outside railing, like fingernails dragging across metal. I shouted, "Who's out there?" But there was no answer. Just silence. After a minute, I yanked open the hatch and shined the flashlight down. No one. The ground below was empty. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. At dawn, I climbed down again to check for prints, and sure enough, there were more. They were barefoot this time. Deep impressions, spaced apart like someone walking slowly around the tower again. But here's the thing that really got me. There was only one set. No approach tracks, no exit tracks. Just a perfect circle around the base. I asked to be rotated out. My supervisor told me I was probably overtired and to give it one more night. So I stayed, but I started keeping my rifle loaded. That evening, clouds rolled in and a thunderstorm hit hard around midnight. Visibility dropped to nothing. The tower swayed in the wind and rain hammered the roof. Then, while checking the area with my flashlight, I saw movement below again. Not just one figure this time. 3 of them, standing shoulder to shoulder, facing up at the tower. I tried the binoculars, but every time lightning struck, they looked like they were a little closer, just standing there watching me. I radioed for help, yelling over the static, but the storm was killing the signal. The last thing I heard before the radio died was Mike's voice, faint through the crackle. "Stay inside. Don't answer it." Answer what? I didn't know what he meant. Then came the knocking. 3 slow knocks on the metal hatch below me. I froze. Then again, 3 knocks, perfectly spaced. Thunder rolled overhead and rain poured down. And in between each rumble, I could hear breathing through the hatch. Slow and calm, like whoever was down there wasn't in any hurry. I backed away and pointed the rifle down, yelling at them to leave. But when the next lightning strike hit, there was no one there, just wet metal. I stayed in the far corner of the cabin till sunrise, gun in hand. When I finally dared to look outside, there were new prints on the ground, but not just around the tower this time. There were handprints on the lower rungs of the ladder, dark stains trailing down like someone had been bleeding. The next morning, I packed my gear and called for extraction. When the helicopter came, I didn't even look back at the tower. Back at the base, I told them everything. The prints, the voices, the figures. They checked the area, but they found nothing. But here's the part that keeps me up. When they pulled the tower's motion camera data, they found 6 triggered recordings between midnight and 4 a.m. the night before. 5 of them were just static, probably just the wind or the rain. But the sixth showed someone inside the cabin. For just a few seconds, standing near the radio, facing the lens. It wasn't me. They said it was probably a glitch, a reflection, or maybe one of the deputies during the inspection. But I knew it wasn't, because in the footage, the thing in the cabin was wearing my jacket. The same jacket I have hanging in my closet. I haven't been back to a fire tower since. Sometimes, when I drive past the Bitterroot Range, I'll see the towers way off the ridgeline, just thin silhouettes against the sky from the road. And every time I get the same feeling in my chest, like somebody up there is still waiting for me to come back. I was stationed at Clearwater National Park from 2017 to 2021. It was a big, quiet forest with miles of hiking trails, campgrounds, and old fire roads that don't get much traffic anymore. It's a beautiful place in the day, but when the sun goes down out there, it's black. No town glow, no noise, just dark. I'd been there for about a year when it happened. It was late August. warm, but the nights were already getting colder. We'd had a few reports of people hearing screams near the South Creek area, deep in the forest, far away from any campsites. A couple of backpackers swore they heard a woman calling for help after midnight. We checked it out twice, but we found nothing. That week, I got assigned to patrol it alone. Standard overnight sweep. I didn't mind. The forest had never bothered me. I left the station around 6 in the evening, took my truck down to the old service trail, and ran parallel to the creek. From there, it was a 2-mile hike to the water. I set up a little camp at the fork where the two streams met. Quiet, just the sound of the current and bugs. Around 9, I started walking upstream, flashlight in hand, just making sure there were no campers or off-trail fires. After about an hour, I found something odd. A tent frame, broken and collapsed, half buried under some leaves. It looked like it had been there for weeks. There were no bags, no food, and no IDs. Just the frame and part of a sleeping bag that had been cut open. I radioed it in, logged the location, and decided to keep moving for another half-mile before headed back. That's when I started to hear what sounded like talking. It was faint, like two people whispering across the water. I shut off my flashlight and listened. At first, I thought it might have just been the creek echoing, but then I caught a few clear words. It sounded like somebody saying, "Don't go." I yelled out, "Park ranger, if you're lost, stay where you are." The voices stopped immediately. I waited maybe 30 seconds, then turned my light back on. There was nobody there, just the sound of running water and wind. I was already getting a bad feeling, but figured maybe sound was carrying weird over the creek. I started heading back to camp, and about halfway there, my radio crackled on. "Ranger Cole, this is base. Are you still at the South Creek?" It wasn't unusual to check in, but the voice wasn't a normal night operator. It was higher, younger. I said, "Yeah, I'm here. Who's this?" There was a silence for a few seconds, and then the same voice came back, quieter this time. "Don't go." I stopped talking. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. "Who is this?" I said. No answer. The radio stayed open for a moment. I could hear faint static, maybe breathing. Then it went dead. I tried calling base back, but the line was dead. No signal, no static, just silence. That's when I heard something move behind me. I spun around, light up. Nothing but trees. Then, maybe 50 feet away, a shadow slipped between the trunks, human-sized and fast. I yelled again, "Park ranger, you need to identify yourself." No reply. I kept my light on the spot, waiting to see movement, but there was nothing. I started backing toward camp, keeping the beam in front of me. When I got back, my tent was unzipped. I knew I'd zipped it before leaving. Inside, my radio was sitting on my cot, turned off, even though I hadn't touched it since the call. That's when the screaming started. It sounded like a woman, maybe 100 yards away across the creek. Long, drawn-out screams. Not words, just pure panic. I grabbed my flashlight and crossed the bank. Heart pounding, I called out again. "Park ranger, I'm coming." The screams kept moving, deeper into the woods, always just far enough ahead that I couldn't catch up. Then they suddenly stopped. I stood there in total silence, listening. Then, from behind me, the exact same scream started again, right where I'd come from. I turned, light shaking in my hand. It was coming from my camp. I ran back, slipping on wet ground. When I reached a clearing, the sound had stopped. My tent was gone. Not torn down, just gone, nowhere to be found. The stakes were still in the ground, but the fabric and poles were missing. My pack, my food, everything, even the radio. I don't scare easy, but that's when I knew I needed to get out. I started back down the trail towards my truck, moving fast, light swinging in every direction. I could hear something following me. Soft footsteps just beyond the beam. Every time I stopped, they stopped. The trail ran close to the creek for a while, then cut uphill. When I reached the incline, I turned around and aimed the flashlight back down the path. There was something standing at the bottom of the slope. They were facing me, completely still. I couldn't make out their face, just the shape. I raised my light higher and realized they were wearing my clothes. The same reflective ranger patch on the shoulder gave it away. I shouted again, but they didn't move, didn't even react. I backed away slowly until I was far enough up the hill that the trees hid them. I didn't run, not yet, but I wanted to. Every part of me wanted to. By the time I reached the service trail, I was sweating despite the cold. My truck was parked about a quarter mile down. I didn't see anyone else on my way, but the whole forest felt wrong. Like I wasn't alone, but whatever was out there didn't need to chase me. It knew where I'd go. When I reached the truck, both doors were wide open. The cab light was on. The radio was hissing faint static, the same frequency I'd been using all night. I climbed in, locked the doors, and just sat there for a second trying to steady my breathing. Then, through the static, I heard it again. The same young voice from before. Don't go. I threw the truck in gear and got the hell out of there. By the time I reached the main road, the signal came back. I called base, the real base, and told them what had happened. They sent another ranger team up the next morning. They didn't find my tent or any of my missing gear. But they did find another tent half buried about a mile upstream. Inside were some old camping supplies, a torn sleeping bag, and an ID tag from 1998. The name was Julia Haskins, a woman who'd gone missing that year while hiking alone in the same area. The Park Service said it was just a coincidence, that sound carries weird in these mountains and that radios can pick up stray signals. But two things didn't sit right with me. First, the voice that came through my radio used my name before it said don't go. And second, when they reviewed the patrol logs from that night, my radio showed no transmissions at all, not even static. I transferred to a new station a few months later. Different forest, lower elevation. I don't even go near the creek trails anymore. And sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night and it's dead quiet outside, I swear I can still hear a woman's voice, distant and weak, saying the same thing, don't go.